Story 1: The Dark Web's Whisper. The small town of Millinocket was a forgotten corner of the world, a place where the paper mill's smokestacks loomed like sentinels over sagging houses and streets that smelled of pulp and damp earth. Ethan Reed, a wiry 34-year-old with thinning brown hair and eyes shadowed from too many late nights, lived in a cramped apartment above a hardware store, the floorboards creaking with every step. He was a computer technician, contracted by local businesses and stubborn old-timers to fix their glitchy PCs, install shaky internet connections, and untangle the chaos of their digital lives. Ethan had seen it all. Clients blaming Windows for their own mistakes, stories of viruses from clicking dodgy links, but nothing prepared him for the night his world tilted into darkness. It was a Wednesday in late October, the air cold and biting, the fog rolling off the nearby Penobscot River, turning the town into a gray ghost. Ethan had been at it for years. His toolkit, a battered laptop, and a bag of cables. His days a blur of troubleshooting and coffee. That afternoon, his phone rang. A call from Harold Grayson, owner of Grayson's Hardware, a cluttered shop on Main Street that sold everything from nails to fishing lures. "My internet's acting up," Harold barked, his voice rough from years of shouting over mill noise. "Must be a virus. Those hackers are at it again." Ethan sighed, picturing Harold unplugging a router or downloading a Trojan, and grabbed his gear. The drive to the shop, a short trip through the fog. The hardware store was a maze of shelves, the air thick with the scent of wood shavings and oil, the windows fogged with condensation. Harold greeted him, a wiry man in his 60s, with a face like crumpled paper, his eyes wide with paranoia. "They're after me, Reed. Hackers. Government. Who knows?" He ranted, leading Ethan to a dusty back office where a clunky desktop sat under a flickering bulb. Ethan pulled out his laptop, the screen's glow a stark contrast to the room's gloom, and sat down, nodding absently as Harold droned on about Microsoft's evils. "Good luck," Harold said, wandering off, leaving Ethan to work. He opened the browser. Blank, no homepage, a sign of Harold's tech ignorance, and typed google.com. A 404 error stared back, a digital dead end. Ethan frowned. Google wasn't down, so the connection was the culprit. He opened the network and sharing center, expecting a disconnected cable, and face-palmed. Harold wasn't on any network. He scanned for wireless signals, 3 WEP encrypted options, their keys likely lost to Harold's memory, and pulled out his cracking tool, a program he'd use to bypass stubborn networks. As the software hummed, searching for the key, a new network popped up, unprotected, its SSID a random hexadecimal string 7A9C3F2B. No name, no hint of its source. Ethan's curiosity piqued, the boredom of waiting for Harold a dull ache. "Let's see where this came from," he muttered, connecting to the network, the signal strong despite the fog outside. His laptop hummed, and he opened his toolkit. Ping sweeps, tracer routes, a hacker's playground. The screen flickered, a brief freeze, and he shrugged it off as lag, the rural internet's usual curse. Minutes later, it happened again, longer this time, the cursor lagging, and then a third, the freeze stretching, his heart kicking as the screen flickered. Weird, he thought, a prickle on his neck, the air in the room growing colder, the bulb's hum turning to a buzz. The browser opened on its own, a chat box popping up. "Hello." Ethan stared, his breath catching, the keys cold under his fingers. He'd heard of AI chatbots, programmed responses to deter hackers, but this felt different. The text too deliberate, the timing too precise. Another message. "I want to talk to you now." He typed back, "Who are you?" A mistake, a challenge, and the reply came fast. "You need to leave this network now. This is your last warning." Ethan smirked, impressed by the sophistication, figuring it was a security script. He typed, "Make me." A cocky jab, and the screen froze, the room's temperature dropping, the fog outside pressing against the window like a living thing. The chat box refreshed. "I'm telling you one last time. Leave now." Then a flood of text. His name, Ethan James Reed. His address on Pine Street. His phone number. Credit card details. His parents' names and their addresses in Old Town. His sister's apartment in Portland. Ethan's heart sank, the color draining from his face, his hands trembling on the keys. He couldn't move, paralyzed, the screen a mirror to his fear. The next message hit harder. "Don't look at me like that." His webcam light blinked on, a green eye in the dark, and he realized someone was watching, someone who knew him. The screen flashed, images searing into his mind, disemboweled bodies, entrails spilling, video clips of mass suicides, firing squads, faces frozen in terror, blood pooling on concrete. The sounds came, screams, gunshots, the wet rip of flesh, a cacophony that burrowed into his skull. Ethan's heart raced, his body shaking, sweat drenching his shirt, the room spinning as the horrors played on a loop. He lunged for the power button, slamming it, the screen going black, and bolted to the bathroom, retching into the sink, the taste of bile and fear thick in his mouth. It took 20 minutes to compose himself, his legs weak, the hardware store's silence a mockery. He returned, the client's computer now connected, Harold back with a grin. "Fixed it, eh?" "Thanks, Reed." Ethan nodded, mute, grabbing his laptop, its weight a curse, and left, the fog outside a shroud that matched the darkness in his mind. Millinocket held its secrets, and Ethan knew he'd stumbled into something alive, something that saw him, and the dark web's whisper would follow. Ethan Reed stumbled out of Grayson's Hardware in Millinocket, Maine, his laptop clutched like a cursed relic, the fog outside a cold shroud that matched the dread in his chest. The images, disemboweled bodies, mass suicides, firing squads, seared into his mind, the screams echoing in his skull, a cacophony he couldn't silence. His hands shook as he threw the laptop into his Subaru's passenger seat, the engine roaring to life, the drive back to his apartment a blur through the fog. The Penobscot River's murmur, usually a comfort, sounded like a hiss now. The town streets empty, the streetlights flickering, as if Millinocket itself knew what he'd seen. His apartment above the hardware store was a cramped box of creaking floors and peeling wallpaper, the air stale with the scent of old coffee and dust. Ethan locked the door, the bolts click a weak shield, and set the laptop on the kitchen table, its closed lid a taunting presence. He poured a whiskey, the burn doing little to steady his nerves, and sat on the sagging couch, the TV flickering on to a late-night infomercial. Some smiling woman selling knives, her cheer a mockery of his fear. The chat box's words replayed. Ethan James Reed, 14 Pine Street, Millinocket, Maine. His life lay bare, his parents' names, his sister's address, the webcam's green eye staring through him, and then the final message. You might see something you regret. He didn't touch the laptop for hours, the whiskey bottle half empty, the TV's drone a faint hum against the fog's press on the windows. But curiosity, that old killer, gnawed at him. What was that network? 7A1C3F2B. Who or what had seen him? At 2:00 a.m., the apartment too quiet, the radiator's hiss sounding like a whisper. He opened the laptop, the screen's glow, harsh in the dark. It booted up, the chat box still open, the last message glaring. You might see something you regret. Ethan's finger hovered over the power button, but another message appeared. You came back. His heart slammed, the air growing colder, the room's shadows stretching long and wrong. The screen flickered, the browser opening on its own, a video loading, a grainy feed, the timestamp 2:03 a.m., the image shaking as if shot on a handheld camera. A figure stood in a dark space, a man in a hood, his face obscured, holding a knife that glinted in dim light. He turned, slow, and the camera panned. A body, human, strapped to a table, its limbs splayed, the skin pale and bruised. The man raised the knife, and the scream that followed, a raw, animal sound, matched the ones Ethan had heard before, the blade slicing through flesh, blood pooling, the man's movements precise, ritualistic. Ethan gagged, slamming the laptop shut, but the audio continued, the scream looping, the knife's wet thud, a rhythm in the dark. He yanked the battery out, the sound stopping, and threw the laptop across the room. The crash loud in the silence. The radiator hissed louder, the fog outside a gray wall, and a new sound, a faint tap, tap, tap from the window. Ethan froze, whiskey spilling on the floor, and crept to the glass, the street below empty, the fog swirling, but the tapping grew, fingers, deliberate, on the pane. He pulled the curtain back, and there, pressed against the glass, was a face, pale, eyeless, a slash of a mouth grinning. The same face he'd seen in the video's flashes, the same grin that had haunted the suicides, the executions. It tapped again, the glass creaking, and whispered, "Ethan, you stayed." He screamed, stumbling back, the bat from his closet now in hand, the room spinning as the face vanished, the tapping replaced by silence, the fog outside undisturbed. His phone buzzed, a text, unknown number. Look at your screen. The laptop, unpowered, flickered on, the video playing again. The hooded man now staring at the camera, his hood falling to reveal nothing, a void where his face should be, the knife dripping. The screen flashed, Ethan's apartment, a live feed, the angle from his own webcam, showing him on the couch, bat in hand, the eyeless face behind him, grinning in the shadows. Ethan swung the bat, shattering the laptop, the screen sparking, the feed dying, but the face didn't vanish. It stepped closer, a shadow in the room, its grin stretching, the air cold as the grave. "You saw," it rasped, and Ethan ran, the door slamming behind him, the stairs a blur as he fled into the fog, the streetlights flickering, the Penobscot's hiss a laugh in the dark. He crashed at a friend's, Nate, a mechanic who didn't ask questions, but the nightmares followed, the face, the knife, the screams, every night at 2:03 a.m. The hour burned into his mind. Months later, Ethan moved to Portland, a new job, a new life, but the dark web's whisper lingered. He stopped using computers, kept the webcam taped, but late at night, he'd hear it, a tap, tap, tap at the window, the eyeless grin in the glass, the voice rasping, "You stayed." Millinocket's fog had marked him, the network a gateway to something alive, something that saw him, and Ethan knew, no matter where he ran, the dark web's eyes would follow, a shadow on the screen that Derry's darkness couldn't bury. Story 2. The MySpace Stalker. Bangor was a town where the fog rolled off the Penobscot River like a living thing, seeping into the streets and clinging to the brick facades of its high school, where the shadows seemed to linger a little too long. Jake Harper, a lanky 14-year-old with a mop of sandy hair and a nervous habit of tugging at his sleeves, was a freshman at Bangor High, a sprawling building of lockers and fluorescent lights that buzzed like a swarm of angry bees. He lived with his mom, Ellen, a nurse with tired eyes, and his older brother, Matt, a senior who ruled the hallways with a football jersey and a smirk. Jake was shy, more comfortable with his Nintendo DS than with the cliques that ruled the cafeteria. But MySpace, his digital escape, had opened a new world, a place where he could be someone else. It was a crisp evening in February 2007, the snow melting into slush outside, the house warm with the smell of Ellen's chicken stew. Jake sat in his room, the glow of his desktop screen lighting his face, the MySpace page a kaleidoscope of profiles, friends from school, bands he liked, random strangers he'd never meet. He'd set up his account a month ago, posting photos of his dog, Rusty, and a goofy shot from last summer's lake trip. His profile song, Sweet Child O' Mine, looping in the background. That night, a friend request popped up, a girl named Lila Rose. Her profile picture, a sultry brunette with a smile that promised secrets. Her status set to single and looking. Jake's heart skipped. She was older, maybe 17, and her message was flirty. "Hey cutie, love your pics. Let's chat." He blushed, typing back, his fingers clumsy on the keys, and soon they were messaging. Lila asking about school, his hobbies, his favorite music. She was from nearby, she said, her words smooth, her profile sparse but alluring. After an hour, she suggested trading nudes, her tone playful but insistent. Jake, a 14-year-old with hormones and no filter, thought, this is it, my chance. He snapped a few photos in the bathroom, the mirror fogged, his face red, and sent them, his pulse racing. Lila replied with her own, grainy shots of a curvy figure, her face blurred, the thrill electric. Things were great, a secret thrill in the digital dark, until a new message hit. Unknown sender, no profile. "Hey, I have those naked pictures of you. Talk to me, or I send them to everyone on your friends list." Jake's stomach dropped, his hands shaking as he stared at the screen, the MySpace music fading to a distant hum. He typed, "Who are you?" And the reply came fast. "A friend. Get on at 9 p.m. every night, or your pics go viral." The sender claimed to be a senior at Bangor High, a guy named Tyler, but the voice behind the words felt older, sharper, a predator's edge. Jake freaked out, his room too small, the posters of Green Day mocking his naivety. He didn't tell anyone. Ellen would ground him. Matt would laugh, and his friends would never let it go. He hoped it'd fade, a bad dream, and logged off, the screen going black. The next night, at 9 p.m., the message came again. I'm waiting. Jake's fingers hesitated, then typed, okay, and the chat began, the sender demanding details, where he lived, his schedule, his family. Over weeks, it worsened. Tyler's persona slipped, revealing an adult voice, a psycho who knew too much. One night, at a friend's house, his phone buzzed. His sister, Amy, 13, her voice trembling. Some guy called asking for you. Got mad when I said you weren't here. Jake's blood ran cold. The pizza party forgotten. The TV's laugh track a cruel contrast. He brushed it off, but the fear grew, a shadow in his mind. A few nights later, unable to log on until midnight, he signed into AIM, and the first message hit. I've been sitting in front of your house, admiring your Winnie the Pooh flag, trying to look into your bedroom window. Jake's breath stopped, his room spinning. Ellen always put up seasonal flags, and the cheesy Valentine's Day Pooh flag waved outside. The guy knew where he lived, had watched him, and Jake's denial shattered. He woke Matt, his brother's eyes narrowing as Jake spilled the story, the nudes, the threats. Matt cursed, waking Ellen, who freaked, her nurse's calm gone as she dialed 911, her hands shaking. The police arrived. Deputy Hargrove, a gruff man with a gray mustache, and Officer Dunn, young and skeptical. Jake showed them the messages, his face burning, and they took notes, their radios crackling. We'll patrol, Hargrove said, but his tone was doubtful, the fog outside a barrier. That night, Jake ignored the messages, accepting the world might see him naked, the shame await. Over months, girls messaged him, his pics circulating, rumors spreading. He's gay. He sent them to Tyler, and school became a gauntlet. His peers' whispers, a knife in his back. Jake Harper barely slept after the police left his house in Bangor, Maine, the fog pressing against his bedroom window, the Winnie the Pooh flag outside a mocking reminder of the stalker's words, the MySpace messages, the nudes he'd sent to Lila Rose, the threats from the unknown sender, Tyler, had turned his digital sanctuary into a prison, the screen a mirror to his shame. His mom, Ellen, hovered, her nurse's hands trembling as she checked locks, his brother Matt pacing with a baseball bat, their small house on Spruce Street, a fortress under siege. Jake kept his phone off, the AIM icon a ghost in his mind. But the fear lingered, a cold knot that tightened with every creak of the floorboards, every shadow in the hall. The next few months were a blur of dread. Girls at Bangor High whispering, passing his photos like contraband. The rumors spreading like wildfire. He's gay. He sent them to Tyler, they said, their laughter a blade in his back, his locker a target for snickers and shoved notes. Jake stopped logging into MySpace, deleted his profile, but the messages kept coming. Unknown numbers, texts with his pics, the stalker's taunts evolving. "You can't hide, Jake," one read. "I see you at school." He'd catch glimpses, a figure in a hooded jacket near the bleachers, a shadow by the bus stop, but it was always gone when he looked, the fog a cloak for his tormentor. Ellen called the cops again, but Hargrove's shrugs grew wearier. "No proof, kid. Keep your head down." By his senior year, spring 2011, the nightmare had faded, a scar he'd buried under football games and late-night study sessions. Jake had grown into a lean 16-year-old, his sandy hair longer, his confidence rebuilt, the incident a distant memory, pushed aside by prom plans and college applications. That Friday night, a crisp April evening, he went to the homecoming game, the stadium alive with cheers, the floodlights cutting through the fog. He walked with friends, Mark, a linebacker with a booming laugh, and Sarah, a quiet girl with a camera, toward the concession stand, the smell of popcorn and hot dogs thick in the air, the crowd a shield against the past. Inside, jostling for nachos, a man approached, middle-aged, balding, his face pockmarked, his eyes too bright. "Somebody wants to talk to you under the bleachers," he said, his voice low, a snake's hiss, and Jake's heart dropped, 4 years of fear flooding back. He knew it was him, the stalker, the voice behind the screen, even though they'd never met. "I don't want to talk to anyone," Jake snapped, stepping back, his friends staring, Mark's hand on his shoulder. The man smirked, vanishing into the crowd, and Sarah asked, "What was that about?" Jake gave a quick rundown. MySpace, the nudes, the threats, his voice shaking, the stadium's noise a distant roar. They returned to the stands, the game a blur, until Mark's friend, Tom, ran up, breathless. "Hey, some weird guys in the bathroom showing naked pictures of you." Jake's stomach churned, the crowd's cheers turning to a hum, and a teacher, Mr. Daniels, overheard, his face hardening. "Stay here," Daniels said, pulling out his phone, dialing 911 as he bolted toward the bathroom. Jake followed, the bleachers shaking underfoot, the fog thick below, and reached the restroom, empty, the sinks dripping, a faint smell of urine and fear. The guy was gone, but parents nearby gave a description: tall, balding, driving a rusted Chevy, and Jake relayed it to the cops, Hargrove arriving with a grim nod. That night, Jake didn't sleep. The house a fortress again, Ellen's hands shaking as she brewed tea, Matt guarding the door. He was terrified the stalker would come, the photos a weapon, the past a chain. Months passed, the fear fading, the school year ending, until one spring afternoon, the dean's office called. Police filled the room. Hargrove, Dunn, a detective with a scarred face, and they spoke, their voices low. "We got him," the detective said. "Been harassing other kids too. Same MO. Sexual assault on a minor. Child porn. Gigabytes of it. All tied to you, Jake. He's locked up till 2037. The man's name was Richard Poole, a 42-year-old with a history of crimes, his obsession with Jake, a thread in a web of evil. The trial was a gauntlet, photos, messages, his shame laid bare. But the conviction brought relief, a weight lifted. Jake moved on, college in Orono, a new life, but the scars remained. Late at night, in his dorm, he'd hear it, a tap at the window, a whisper, "You can't hide." The fog outside a mirror to Banger's shadows. He'd wake, heart pounding, the MySpace login, a ghost in his mind, the stalker's grin, a memory that lingered. Banger had let him go, but the digital dark had marked him, a whisper that followed, a face under the bleachers that never faded. Story 3. The Hidden Notes of the Web. Derry was a town where the past clung to the present like damp moss, a place of narrow streets and looming mills, where the fog rolled off the Kenduskeag stream and turned the nights into a gray haze. In 2001, before Google became the internet's gatekeeper, the web was a wild frontier, a patchwork of GeoCities blogs, basic HTML pages, and discussion boards that buzzed with raw, unfiltered voices. Lucas Bennett, a wiry 19-year-old with a mop of dark hair and a restless curiosity, lived in a small apartment above his parents' garage. His room a shrine to tech. Old CRT monitors, stacks of floppy disks, and a clunky desktop that hummed like a dying beast. He worked nights at the local Radio Shack, selling flip phones and coax cables, but his real passion was the internet, a labyrinth he explored with the zeal of a treasure hunter. That Friday evening, the air cold and sharp, the snow outside piling against the windows, Lucas sat at his desk, the glow of his monitor casting shadows on the walls. The internet back then was a maze of links, random blogs, fan sites for obscure bands, GeoCities pages with garish backgrounds and MIDI music. CSS was rare, JavaScript clunky, and most sites were raw HTML, their designs crude but honest. Lucas loved the chaos, the feeling of stumbling into uncharted corners, and that night he was deep in a rabbit hole, clicking from link to link, a digital explorer in a lawless land. He started on a blog about vintage arcade games, then jumped to a GeoCities site with pixelated UFO art, each click a new door, the web a sprawling map with no end. After an hour, he landed on an odd page, a site that looked out of place, its design too sleek for the era, the layout clean, the text sharp. It was a collection of random thoughts, snippets from different voices, each entry cryptic, like coded messages passed in a secret club. The red door opens at midnight, one read. They watch from the tower, said another, the words chilling in their vagueness. Lucas frowned, leaning closer, the monitor's hum growing louder, the room's chill seeping deeper. The site was too advanced, tables aligned perfectly, fonts consistent, a sophistication that stood out in the HTML wilderness. He scrolled, the entries growing darker. The shadows know your name. Don't look behind you. And his unease grew, a prickle on his neck he couldn't shake. Curiosity drove him to the source code, a habit from years of tinkering. And hidden in the JavaScript comments were IP addresses, dozens of them, raw and unlinked, a trail of breadcrumbs in the digital dark. Lucas copied them into a text file, his fingers steady despite the chill, and began enumerating, using tools he'd learned from late-night hacking forums. Some IPs led to routers, university networks mostly, their banner messages outdated, the default Cisco credentials from the early 90s, admin, granting access to most. He didn't poke too deep, just noted the locations, MIT, Stanford, a few in Europe. But a handful of IPs were web servers, running Apache on Linux, or BSD, their directories sparse, mostly empty except for one. The final IP opened a server with a massive directory, hundreds of HTML files, TIFF images, subdirectories branching like a spider web. An NS lookup returned no reverse records, a tracer route ending in Colorado, the connection a ghost in the ether. The HTML files were records, clinical, precise, like a psychologist's notes, detailing patients with names redacted. Subject exhibits paranoia. Hears voices at 3 a.m., one read. Subject claims to see figures in mirrors, said another, the words cold, detached. The TIFFs were scanned faxes, military memos, medical reports, diagrams of brain scans, with handwritten notes in the margins. The ink faded but legible. Patient 47, auditory hallucinations increasing, possible external influence. One note read, the phrase sending a shiver down Lucas's spine. He clicked into a subdirectory, the files older, the faxes yellowed, and returned to the parent directory, only to freeze. At the top was a new file. One hello there, HTML, timestamped that exact minute, 11:47 p.m. His heart kicked, the room's shadows stretching, the monitor's glow harsher. He opened it, plain text, no formatting. We see you. The word stared back, lowercase, unquoted, a whisper in the dark. 15 seconds later, the server dropped, the connection severed, his browser crashing to a blank screen. Lucas's breath caught, the apartment too quiet, the radiator's hiss sounding like a voice, the fog outside pressing against the window like a living thing. He sat, frozen, the monitor reflecting his wide eyes, Derry's night a shroud around him, and knew he'd found something he wasn't meant to see, and it had found him back. Lucas Bennett sat frozen at his desk in his Derry, Maine apartment. The glow of his crashed monitor reflecting his wide-eyed terror. The words we see you burned into his mind like a brand. The night had deepened, the fog outside pressing against the garage window like a living thing. The radiator's hiss, now a sinister whisper that matched the chill seeping into his bones. The clock read 11:53 p.m. The server's sudden drop, leaving his browser a blank void. The IP addresses and cryptic notes from the hidden web, a ghost in the digital ether. Lucas's hands trembled as he rebooted the computer. The hum of the hard drive, a drumbeat of dread, his curiosity warring with the fear that had rooted him to the chair. He reopened the text file with the IPs, his fingers hesitant, the room's shadows stretching long and jagged across the peeling wallpaper. The connection to the server was gone. The Colorado endpoint, a dead end. But the memory of those files, the psychologist's notes, the military faxes, the time-stamped warning, gnawed at him. Subject 47. Auditory hallucinations increasing. Possible external influence. The note had read, and Lucas felt it now. A presence, a weight in the air, like someone was breathing down his neck. He ran a tracer route again, the command line spitting back fragmented hops, the network a maze he couldn't map, and the unease grew, a cold knot in his gut. The next night, Friday, the fog thicker, the apartment a cocoon of gray. Lucas couldn't resist. He sat at the desk, the monitor's glow a harsh spotlight, and tried the IP again. Nothing. The server silent, a ghost ship adrift. But as he scrolled through his notes, the screen flickered, the browser opening on its own. The same sleek page with cryptic messages. The red door opens at midnight. They watch from the tower, and a new file at the top. To watch me to HTML, time-stamped 12:01 a.m. His heart slammed, the room's temperature dropping, the radiator's hiss turning to a growl. He clicked it. Text appeared. You're still here. Then a live feed, grainy and shaking. A camera angle from above, showing his desk, his face, the apartment's clutter, the webcam light blinking green. Lucas leaped back, the chair crashing, his breath fogging in the cold. "Who are you?" he shouted. But the feed continued, panning to the window. Outside, a figure stood, tall and blurred, its face a shadow, its eyes glinting in the fog. The screen flashed, images from the faxes, brain scans with pins marked, a military memo stamped classified, and then his own face, superimposed, his eyes hollowed out like the patient's notes. The figure at the window tapped, slow and deliberate, the glass creaking, and a voice rasped from the speakers, low and hollow. "We see you, Lucas." The webcam whirred, adjusting, and he smashed it with a hammer from his toolkit, the screen going black, the figure vanishing, the tapping stopping. He didn't sleep, the apartment a trap, the fog a wall, and called his friend Sarah, a tech-savvy co-worker at Radio Shack, her voice groggy at 1:00 a.m. "Someone's hacked me," he said, voice shaking, and she came over, her flashlight cutting through the dark. They checked the router, unplugged, reset, but the next night, the page returned, the feed live again, the figure at the window, its tap, 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 a rhythm of doom. Sarah traced the IP, her face paling. Military servers, decommissioned, buried in Colorado, a black site with no records. "This isn't possible," she whispered, but the screen proved it, the voice repeating, "You stayed." Lucas unplugged everything, threw the modem out, but the whispers followed, through the walls, the window, a hum in the pipes. He went to the library, digging into Derry's history, finding a file. 1950s experiments, military-funded, psychological tests in the Barrens, subjects hearing voices, seeing shadows, the project shut down, the records lost. Subject 47 vanished, one note read, claimed the watchers followed. Lucas's blood ran cold. The notes, the feed. It was connected, a digital echo of a nightmare buried deep. He moved to Portland, a new apartment, no tech, but the tapping came, faint, from the ceiling, the fog outside a mirror to Derry's past. Years later, at 30, Lucas worked manual labor, avoiding screens, but late at night, he'd hear it, a whisper, "We see you," the tap of fingers, the shadow at the window. He'd wake, heart pounding, the eyeless face in his dreams, Derry's fog, a reminder of the web he'd stumbled into. A presence that watched, a code that lived, a horror that wouldn't let him go. Story 4. The Cult Video Abyss. Portland was a city of cobblestone streets and old brick buildings, where the fog rolled off Casco Bay and clung to the waterfront like a shroud, turning the night into a labyrinth of shadows. Danny Walsh, a lean 22-year-old with dark circles under his eyes and a nervous tic of tapping his fingers, lived in a cramped studio apartment above a fish market. the air thick with the smell of salt and decay. He worked days at a used bookstore on Congress Street, shelving dog-eared paperbacks and chatting with eccentric regulars, but his nights were consumed by a darker curiosity, the deep web, a digital underbelly he'd heard about in hushed tones from college friends and late-night forums. Danny was a thrill seeker, drawn to the forbidden, and 2014 was the year he decided to dive in. It started in mid-November, the air cold and biting, the city quiet under a blanket of fog that muted the harbor's horn. Danny had heard the horror stories, scam sites promising assassins, underground markets for drugs, and worse, the kind of darkness that bleached minds and haunted dreams. He'd scoffed at first, figuring it was urban legend, but the allure grew, a siren call in the digital void. He prepared himself, buying a cheap laptop from a pawn shop, installing Tor, and setting up a VPN, his hands shaking as he typed in the first onion link from a wiki page he'd found on a sketchy forum. Just a peek, he told himself, more worried about the cops than the nightmares, the legal risks outweighing the unknown terrors. The afternoon sun filtered weakly through his grimy window as he began, the laptop's hum a steady pulse in the silence. The deep web had no Google, just a list of links, random strings of numbers followed by onion, gateways to places with no names, no faces. He clicked through dead sites first, more than he'd expected, their pages blank or broken, a digital graveyard. Then came the markets, eBay-style stalls offering military-grade weapons, vials of pills with cryptic labels, services advertised in broken English, the prices in Bitcoin a taunt to his curiosity. He lingered too long. The screen's glow casting shadows on his walls, the room growing colder, the fish market's stench seeping through the floorboards. 2 hours in, he found a chat room, the text scrolling fast, users with handles like Shadow Reaper and Blood Moon, their words a cesspool of threats and depravity. "I'll gut you," one typed. "Send me the kid," another begged, the requests for illegal content making Danny's stomach turn. It was like walking a dark alley, the dangers palpable, the anonymity a mask for monsters. He scrolled, his fingers numb, the air thick with a smell like burnt wires, and then he saw it, a link, 137K9, onion, labeled only The Gathering. The page was sparse, an email address, join us, darkvoid.onion, and a block of text, religious gibberish about the blood of the unworthy and the eye that sees all, the words twisting in his mind like a spell. Naive, reckless. Danny clicked the embedded video, the screen buffering, the laptop's fan whirring louder. The footage was grainy, shot on a cheap camcorder, the timestamp flickering, 2003. The colors washed out, audio crackling. A man appeared, tall and thin, his face hidden behind a burlap mask stitched with a crude eye, a knife in his hand, glinting in the dim light. The camera panned, shaky, revealing a concrete room, damp walls streaked with rust, and a body, human, naked, strapped to a table, its limbs twitching. The man raised the knife, and Danny's breath caught as the blade sliced through flesh, cutting at the buttocks, blood pooling, the sound wet and sickening, like a butcher's work. The scene shifted, another angle, the head severed, the neck a ragged stump, the mask turning to the camera, the eye on the burlap seeming to blink. A new shot, a church, its steeple crooked, a symbol carved into the door, a circle with an inverted cross, the wood weathered and stained. Danny's hands shook, the room spinning, the video looping. More bodies, hung by hooks, their torsos split, intestines dangling, the mask appearing again, its gaze piercing through the screen. He slammed the laptop shut, the audio cutting off mid-scream, his chest tight, the air cold as a grave. The fish market stench was gone, replaced by a metallic tang, and he knew he'd seen too much, and the deep web had seen him back. He didn't touch the laptop for days, the apartment a prison, the fog outside a mirror to his dread. His boss at the bookstore, Old Man Carver, noticed his pallor, asking, "You okay, kid?" Danny forced a nod, but the mask's eye lingered, a shadow in his mind. And Portland's night felt alive, watching, waiting. He swore it was his last trip, the thrill gone, replaced by a terror that clung like damp rot, a whisper from the dark that he couldn't unhear. Danny Walsh didn't sleep for days after closing the laptop in his cramped Portland, Maine apartment. The grainy image of the burlap masked man and the severed bodies burned into his mind like a scar. The fish market stench below had faded, replaced by a metallic tang that lingered in the air, a reminder of the blood he'd seen on that cult video from the deep web's 13x7 Kane onion page. The fog outside his window pressed against the glass, a gray shroud that turned Casco Bay into a void, and the apartment, its peeling walls, the sagging couch, the hum of the fridge, felt it like a cage, the silence a pulse of dread. Danny's hands trembled as he pushed the laptop under his bed, swearing he'd never touch it again. But the mask's stitched eye haunted him, a whisper in the dark that wouldn't let go. He tried to bury it, throwing himself into work at the used bookstore on Congress Street, stacking yellowed paperbacks and nodding at Old Man Carver's gruff greetings. "You look like hell, kid," Carver said one afternoon, his roomy eyes narrowing, but Danny forced a smile, muttering about a cold. The nightmares started that night. Concrete rooms, the knife's wet slice, the church's crooked steeple, the inverted cross burning into his vision, waking him at 3:00 a.m. His sheets soaked, the fog outside a mirror to the terror inside. He avoided the laptop, unplugged the router, but the feeling grew. A presence, a weight, like someone was breathing in the room. The air cold and thick with that metallic scent. A week later, late on a Saturday, the fog heavier than ever, Danny heard it. A faint tap, tap, tap on the window. He froze, the book he'd been reading slipping from his hands, the apartment's shadows stretching long and wrong. He crept to the glass, the street below empty, the fog swirling, and saw it. A figure, tall and thin, its shape blurred, standing across the street under a flickering streetlight. The burlap mask was unmistakable, the stitched eye glinting, the knife in its hand a dark promise. Danny's breath fogged the window, his heart slamming, and the figure tilted its head as if sensing him, then turned, vanishing into the mist. He stumbled back, the bat from his closet now in hand, the room spinning, the tap, tap, tap echoing in his skull. Panic drove him to act. He called Sarah, a co-worker at the bookstore with a knack for occult lore, her voice sleepy at 1:00 a.m. "I saw something," he said, voice breaking, and she came over, her flashlight cutting through the fog. They checked the street. No tracks, no sign. But Sarah's face paled as he described the mask, the knife. "I've read about this," she whispered, pulling a dusty book from her bag. Maine's Dark Corners, a collection of local legends. The Silent Order, a cult in the 90s, disappeared after rituals in the woods. They wore masks, used knives, left symbols like that cross. People say they still lurk, watching. Danny's blood ran cold. The video, the church, it fit, a digital echo of a nightmare reborn. The next night, unable to resist, Danny powered on the laptop, the Tor browser opening to 13x7k9.onion. The page loaded, same email, same gibberish. But the video played on loop, the masked man turning to the camera, the eye blinking, the knife dripping. A new message appeared. You watched. You're ours. The screen flickered. A live feed. His apartment. The couch. The bat. And behind him, the masked figure, its shape solidifying in the corner, the knife raised. Danny spun, swinging the bat, the figure vanishing, but the screen showed it again. Closer, its rasp filling the room. Join us. He smashed the laptop, the screen sparking, the feed dying, but the tap, tap, tap returned, the window creaking, the fog outside a veil for the cult. He fled to Sarah's, her place a cluttered attic above a thrift shop, but the nightmares followed, 3:00 a.m. The mask, the knife, the church's steeple. She researched, finding old police reports, missing hikers, blood trails in the woods, a symbol carved into trees, the case closed, unsolved. They recruit through the web now, she said, her voice low, and Danny knew he'd been marked. He moved to Augusta, a new job, no tech, but the fog brought the tap, 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 the whisper, "You're ours," the masked face in his dreams. Portland's shadows had let him go, but the cult's abyss had claimed him, a presence in the mist that watched, waited, a horror from the deep web's dark heart.